Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Junior, a Senior, and I, in which the title is more and more of a lie. Because today I'm joined by Paul and Tim to discuss how they use AI assistants to code. And as they will soon tell you, they both have a lot of experience. Tim, could you introduce yourself in 3 sentences or less, please?
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a socio-technical coach type character. I am currently serving as a chief architect or a senior architect at LexisNexis, though I do not speak for them.
Great. What about you, Paul?
I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. I'm Paul. Been working in the industry now, about 20 years. Most of that time, been doing quite what I guess we'd call XP style techniques and practices. Currently contracting and working at a big fintech place in London called New Day.
Okay. I think the first question and the question that can set us off on this episode is, have AI assistants changed your day-to-day and how?
Who wants to start?
Yeah. Paul, why don't you go ahead and take the lead on this one?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that certainly for myself, the change has been quite huge, really. I personally, I've been continuing as a contractor since about November last year. So we're currently in May. So I haven't written any code in my professional kind of career since about November last year, which might seem quite extreme. The way that, we'll discuss this in more detail, I'm sure, but the way that I kind of handle it is very, it's still quite hands-on. I'm still kind of very much in the middle of it and I'm reading what it produces and stuff. So strangely, and maybe we can talk about this later, I don't feel like my skills have gone downhill too much, if that makes sense, but I could be wrong because I've not actually, written much code in this time. But certainly the effect for me has been pretty huge. Yeah. How about yourself, Tim?
Well, I think I last wrote code yesterday. So... but it's been a lot more utilities. Well, I was actually agentically coding today, which I don't count necessarily. In the evening, it was still human in the loop and all of the good things. So I get assistance. Actually, the coding assistant is handy. And we'll talk about some specific ways. But I also find that, feeding a GBT a set of books and documents and then asking questions, using it like Notebook LM, has probably had more influence on me. And then also using it to gather and summarize data from different sources. So, go to consensus, get a whole bunch of stuff, pile that over, go to another, bot, have it go pull the sources and read them, upload the documents, have it summarized, and then start using that to pressure test different policies. It's kind of fun. And you can lose an hour or so. And at some point, you need to drag other human beings in because you've just got studies, academic papers and such things. But it's still useful in that regard. I've found it to be nice also to help me learn things.
And how much can you trust it in those instances? Because I've been mostly stuck into using AI assistants into code because I can kind of verify what happens either by testing or by applying mutation testing or by actually going and testing that it's doing what it does, etc. And I know enough of code to know, okay, am I in the right ballpark? But I don't know enough about system designs or system theory to know, okay, is it pulling it out of the wrong probability in the data, right?
I don't know about yourself, Tim, but so for me personally, interestingly, I've been using it to learn stuff as I go as well. So one of the things that I've been doing in a personal project of mine is a couple of techniques. So one was hexagonal architecture, which I'd never really formally done before. I was aware of it. Thought, you know what, I'm going to have a play with that. And another is domain-driven design. I've spent a lot more time on the kind of front end over the last few years and haven't really again, I was aware of it, but haven't done too much. And as I sit here on my desk now, I've literally got some of the stuff that I've been playing about with recently in my spare time is both hexagonal architecture and domain-driven design, and both kind of things that I was kind of aware of, but hadn't really played with in too much detail. And for both of those things, I bought the books as well. I've been reading them alongside. So I've actually got on my desk now, as it happens, I've got the blue book, and I've got the, somebody told me this one, Domain-Driven Design Distilled, right? But what I've been doing is kind of combining like the hands-on stuff with AI with the stuff that I'm learning at the same time. And so it's been quite useful for me is that when I'm trying to learn a concept, say if I'm trying to learn about, if you talk about something like value objects in domain-driven design, which is really quite straightforward, really. But in the app that I'm building, I actually made the kind of stereotypical mistake when it comes to money and looking at money as a primitive value initially. Quickly realized what I'd done, fixed that, and then asked AI to give me basically record lessons along the way. So it fixed that for me and then kind of wrote like a little article to go along with it. And this is like a lesson, and it can say, okay, what is the value of a value object, right? And then it's actually kind of written a mini article related to that is specifically about, it uses the example in my own code base to teach the concept, if that makes sense. And things like that are really powerful, I think.
So there was a question about how reliable is it on summarizing articles, and the answer is, not much worse than a junior you paid to go read it for you, and will often come up with the wrong conclusions. So my test for it has been, I have it go summarize my articles that I've written and books that I've written. And then when it comes back and it doesn't understand what my point was, I think, well, okay, one of two things is true. Either A, it's fallen into a common line that it expected because of its training data rather than using the actual documents, or alternatively, I didn't describe it very well. And then I start going through and seeing, what can we see? So it's actually a pretty good pressure test for anything that I write. I did find they're completely miserable for writing. They dehumanize what you write and usually take it in directions you wouldn't go. They take your interesting viewpoint and turn it into a mainstream idea written in a mainstream way, and probably with emoticon bullet lists. And it just takes the soul right out of it. But it's not that bad. Even with that, it's still pretty good. If it's like a technical article, okay, now diagram this, or show me, code for this, show me 15 different ways to express this idea in this language. So maybe you're going, if you were new to Python, that would be a classic. You'd say, well, show me 15 different ways to run this algorithm in Python. And it does sometimes pretty well. I did also find, by the way, they're not good with data structures. They love long, stringy functions with a lot of if-else statements. And if you can talk them into taking something and like using a strategy pattern for that instead, you go, that's much better. All the particular strategies are much more testable, and this is better, and this is better. But that, of course, they say that. That's what they say. That's how they're built. But they have the same problem with reading documents and with writing code. They see a path to an answer, and they take it. And it doesn't have to be a short path. It doesn't have to be an easy path, and it doesn't have to be the right path, but it will cut a path to an answer that it's looking for.
Do you have your own collection of skill files? Because I found that I've shared, I think I probably mentioned it on the last call, the dot files that I've got, and they seem to be, they work pretty well for me. And I have a preference, shall we say, for, I prefer a more kind of functional style of coding. Generally, the way I describe it is like kind of functional light. I don't think I'm doing anything too complicated, but I try to, not use mutation if I can. I try to write pure functions wherever I can and make composition the primary kind of mechanism for code reuse wherever I can. And I've got these rules, in my skill files, and I tend to find that, generally speaking, like, it's not perfect. It does sometimes violate the rules, but it's probably 85%, maybe slightly higher than that of the time. It seems to get it about right. I do see sometimes it'll do like some mutation where it shouldn't be doing and stuff like that, and I have to tell it off. I've also found, I don't know if you've experimented much with different models, but recently I've been playing a bit with GPT 5.5 and Codex, because previously it was all Claude. And I'm still in this world right now where I haven't decided if I've switched or not. I keep going back and forth between the two. But I will say Codex and GPT 5.5 seems, at least my initial impression, I've been using it for a couple of weeks now, and it seems to stick to the rules a bit more strictly is the impression that I get. Like it doesn't seem to violate those rules quite as much. Don't know if you've experienced the same.
Well, when I'm at work, I have a rather larger budget of tokens to burn. And so I will use a much more extreme model. When I'm at home, I'm intentionally using a very economical model. So it's actually choosing the lower powered model that should get the job done as it goes. So it's kind of a fun thing to do with Warp 2. And I do that on purpose because I feel like ultimately, if you have the right process and the right guardrails, it doesn't matter if your code was written by you, by hand, by one of your staff people, by an LLM, or by an intelligent goose. It shouldn't make any difference. You should still be within the same guidelines and choosing the same techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a whole bunch of dot files that they ignore most of the time and skill files that they don't actually use. But I'm using a lower cost model at home to do that. And I'm using that to build up my world around the agents. Because again, it's you probably heard my milkshake machine. Have I told you this one?
Don't remember.
Well, my metaphor for the LLM is it's this wonderful milkshake machine, and you can choose the flavors, you can choose the toppings, you can choose the syrups, you can choose the sizes, and it will make wonderful milkshakes. But every once in a while, it'll drop in a blob of rancid chicken liver.
Yeah.
For me, because I'm going to try to jump off to something that you're both describing, and I like a lot this analogy you're making. But you're both referencing those skills and the fact that the LLM does not always do what you want, and sometimes in catastrophic ways. For me, more than the LLM getting it wrong when I try to use it, even with skill files, etc., is more what you're describing, Tim, which is it's not loading the skills. It's just like it will run tests every time. That seems like to be really reinforced. But I also have the mutation skill, the test mutation skill there, and I have to remind it every time. I also have one about OOP, another in the front end about more functional, about more React testing, etc., etc. And those soft gates, it misses 80% of the time. And I have to spend my day saying, did you load the skills? What skills did you load? Did you actually load this one? And I feel like there are some hard gates in there, in the sense that it will run the tests, it will run the linter. All those things seem to be really ingrained in the machine, whereas the softer ones, or the more uncommon ones, it's not that he gets the skill wrong, it's just the skill is not even there for him.
Well, there is some of that. Now, I've not been having it too badly. There are certain things you put into your agents file, and they tend to stay more current, some small things. And I've been offloading the work from the LLM. So you've got layers of things, right? So you have your basic disciplines. I'm a micro committer, so I can always get reset hard, and whatever bad thing it wrote's gone. That's one thing. Of course, I have the mutation testing. Of course, I don't want to trust it too much. So I also have Git hooks. So when I commit, first off, for the commit message has to be in conventional. When it forgets, it's stopped. Number two, I have Git hooks to run all the tests and the linters and all the good things in order to commit. And if the commit fails, it can't ignore that, right? And then on top of that, I had it help me generate a number of scripts just for speed and fun. I have a whole bunch of scripts that I use. So there's one called prepare, which before we start a new piece of work, we run prepare, and it does a pull and it updates the local environment. So it would be, npm install UV sync, whatever it is in the environment I'm in. So we get new code, it syncs the environments, and it runs the tests. So I don't have to worry about the LLM doing that. That's built into my environment, right? And then I also have things like run tests, full test, mutate, a bunch of other scripts. So really all I have to tell it to do is, whenever you create new code, run fix up when you're done, and then run mutate, right? So it's actually pretty simple to get it to work. But I have to make sure that it's not doing all those things in a primitive way, because I don't do those all in a primitive way. If I don't have helper scripts, it's not as easy. Well, that makes my context file smaller, but if I do need something, like I took my entire naming book and made a skill out of it, does it use that skill? Yeah, when I remind it to.
Yeah, it's very similar for myself, actually. I think like my setup is very similar to that. I have Git hooks, and it's the same kind of thing, you know. And again, I think it's the XP thing, isn't it? Like a very used to small commits. You know, if you were to just guess at how many commits you probably do in an hour, like outside of, let's say, forget AI for now. I mean, I don't know how many I would. I think it'd probably be normal. Well, if I'm trying to think now, so
well, here, let me help you out a bit, because I was on LinkedIn or Twitter, wherever it was we were hanging out at the time, a whole bunch of us, and we were talking about how we micro commit, so how many times we push to production in an hour and all this good stuff, and everybody was guessing. So I went, okay, hold on. I went back, did a Git log, and I looked, and I came back and I said, I'm sorry, I was overestimating by 2x how often I do this. It actually is averaging about 6 times an hour. It's much less than I thought. And then other people said, oh, I'm sure it's about 15. And then they came back, it's closer to 5.
Okay. Yeah.
So everybody thinks they do it more than they do.
Yeah, because I was gonna guess around 10. So it sounds about right that if people overestimate, it sounds about right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think working in kind of small, known good kind of steps is, for me, is key. It's interesting though that, you know, I've been chatting to a few people in the background. A lot of my friends, like I'm sure it's the same for all of us. A lot of my technical friends, shall I say, are really into this stuff, and I'm in a few WhatsApp groups with different people and so on. And one of the guys who I worked with a few years ago, he seems to be pushing the other direction more and more now, as in he's been talking about, and I haven't tried this myself yet, Codex released goals recently, I think in the last few days or the last week or something. I haven't tried it, but my understanding is that it's more in the opposite direction of getting, again, I don't know exactly what makes goals different to some of the other kind of, you know, I don't want to say big design up front because I don't want it to sound disparaging. You know, that's the inclination I have, right? But he's telling me that he's having success with this more kind of, let's say, not so much human in the loop side of it. Now, I'm quite skeptical of that overall for a bunch of reasons, and it's not just the technical side. For me, like, I really like feedback, right? I like fast feedback loops, and you can have technical feedback loops, which is like test-driven development. You know, you're in your TDD cycle, but then there's the non-technical feedback loops, which, you know, can be customer feedback, but it can also be you yourself just seeing how the app is kind of evolving, right? And for me, it's like I feel like you miss the chance to, from a UX point perspective, right? If you build too much without the human kind of seeing what's going on and that kind of feedback loop, I just feel like there could be so many gaps and dead ends to UX. And do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how much of that is me as well not wanting that to be able to work as well, because it's probably a bit of that. But I really do feel quite skeptical that this kind of bigger, kind of fully automated way is going to produce great results.
I think that that's a honey trap for Dunning-Kruger syndrome.
Mm.
You know, people who are doing it and they're sure it's really great, and they know that because they haven't really looked at it yet.
Yeah.
But it seems to be great, and they're pretty sure it must be professional work because they're not sure what professional work looks like anymore. So as far as they know, it's fine. And they can go quite a while before they find out. Now, somebody today just posted on LinkedIn, they had a PR that deleted 8,000 lines of code, which was all dead code, unused functions and junk that had been collected over the course of a month or two, which if you did not read the code, you would have no idea.
Yeah.
And of course, I run Vultr to help spot those things, but it doesn't always. So, you know, I don't want to understate the value of these tools, but I also don't want to overstate. And I think it's so easy right now in this divided environment that you are either a just mad, crazy, excited fanboy and you think it's everything and it does everything perfectly, or you're a complete Luddite. And it's this middle path. People like Paul, you know, we're carving through this middle path where it's like, well, it's useful in bounds, and you still need humans. We ask the questions. We realize that's not a great way to do it, and maybe a different way would be better. We want to be able to move, but we get a big advantage because whatever it does since our last commit is disposable to us.
Yeah.
If I was trying to one-shot an application, then throwing away the bad code would be painful to me.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm doing 3 minutes work. I can see every change it made and I can throw them all away. And I think that is probably the most useful effect we get from the LLMs. Yeah, it does the typing for us. Great, fine. And sometimes it's not very well, but you can just try stuff. Change this code to do it this different way. How's that? Oh, that really sucks. Get reset hard. 5 minutes ago is green. Now it's green again.
I do wonder now that you both, Tim, you know exactly how many commits you do in an hour, and Paul, you guesstimated it. I do wonder not at how many commits you're doing with now that AI helps us write code, but the quantity of code in each commit, like the quantity of lines. Are the commits getting bloated not in time? Which for me, they are in time as well. I find that my biggest struggle or the thing I struggle the most getting AI to do is adjusting to what I want as a workflow. Ideally, I would interact with it every 3 minutes. I'm more at like 10, 15 minutes per interaction. But I have a suspicion that what's getting bloated is the amount of code per commit, not the time per commit.
So typically, no. However, there is a different side to this. So I was just talking about this with some other people. I took an application that's been going for a few years, and it's to do analysis of Git repos, whatever. And some of that work was purely discovery. It's like, well, I don't know what data is there. What can we do with it? What's a good visualization? So a lot of it was pure discovery. Other parts were properly TDD'd into place. Discovery tends to be make it work and then get some tests under it, because you're going to throw away a lot of ideas quickly. And then with the LLMs, I started throwing away ideas even more quickly, right? Well, finally, I decided to, crack down on it with mutation testing, because I didn't know. And this isn't a huge project. It really is not. It's 8 pages of analytics. It's not a big deal. It's using Dash. But it only had, 500 some odd tests in it, which is pretty small. So I ran mutt, and it came back with 3,200 surviving mutants.
Wow.
Now, I was shocked, but then it's reasonable considering what it's been through and that it was a hobby project to begin with. And it was kind of a mess. It's like, well, what are we going to do? Well, my natural instinct was run away. 3,200 surviving mutants. So we got to analyze these and package these and start working on solving these. Well, I have an LLM, right? So my first step was, how many of these that are failing are purely cosmetic? So a whole bunch of these are, it calls to generate a figure in whatever my tool is. And it generates a figure, and then it goes, oh, we mutated it and said to put in only a 3 pixel margin instead of a 5 pixel margin, and it failed to catch that. Well, I don't care. I want that kind of stuff to change for you. Oh, this wasn't the right shade of blue. I don't care. I don't care at all. So I had to go through in one sweep and mark all the cosmetic failures with Pragma no mutate. So it doesn't bother mutating those. And that killed so many mutants. And I committed that, and it was huge. On the other hand, it's completely in a comment. It's completely unimportant. It doesn't make any change to the raining code. All of the old tests pass. They still pass, but the mutant count goes down. So that was a huge swath, but it's something I might not have done by hand, going mutant by mutant, because it's just so tedious.
So generally speaking, I think I've been able to keep the commit, like the actual kind of commit size generally down. But there have been, when you give an example like that, there have been some examples where I've allowed it to do larger scale stuff. And one example for that would be recently in an app that we're working working on professionally. Without going into too much detail, though, we were converting some. We have a monorepo, and we were converting some of our internal. The way we've got it structured there, we've got at the root level of the monorepo, there's 3 top level folders. So there's apps, there's libraries, and then there's packages. Apps are deployable applications. Libraries are shared code between apps, but you never pull, from an app into a library. And then packages are basically the same thing as libraries, but they also get published to the wider world, to the wider organization. So people outside the monorepo can use those as well. And recently, for various reasons, we started converting a lot of these libraries or moving them into packages. Now, mostly that's just a lift and shift. It's literally just moving them and adding like a couple of release scripts. But as part of that, Claude actually noticed, it said, oh, well, the newer kind of packages are using vtest. The older ones use jest. And so it said, well, do you want me to convert them? And I'm sat there thinking, well, it's like I trust my tests. I know my tests are good because I know most of these were written before AI anyway. And so it's like, okay. And I allowed it to do that and then just quickly analyze the tests afterwards. So it basically replaced entire, if you know about jest and vtest, though, it's more, the API is almost identical. It's just like slightly more powerful tool in a few ways. So, but that was an example of like having a change set that was significantly larger than normal. But I kind of trusted that the vtest tests can still be trusted, and quickly went in and double checked a few, did a bit of kind of manual mutation testing to prove that the things fail where they should. But generally speaking, I feel like there's been a few exceptions where we have had some larger change sets, but generally we do keep it down, pretty sane levels.
Pablo, I just went and counted, and it actually was fewer this afternoon than I thought, or this evening.
Okay.
So, yeah. So 1 to 4 in a given hour. So it's a little less. They aren't bigger. Generally speaking, a lot of these it added 3 tests. And they're all like, 3-line, 5-line tests. So we're still looking at, a dozen lines of code or so, except for the times that I'm having to regenerate. Some of these are regenerating scripts that the LLM uses rather than actually using the LLM to write code. And then a couple of those are modifying some documents. So, but in general, yeah, it's a little less than I thought today.
Yeah, there is bound to be some fluctuation there. Like you're not going to be 6 on the dot every hour, I'm guessing.
Right.
One question I've got for you, Tim, actually, if you don't mind, because you said at the start of the call, because I mentioned I haven't written any code since November, and you said, oh, well, I wrote code yesterday. Can I ask you, what is the kind of, again, I mean, I'm asking you, to guess it, but the percentage split for yourself, would you say is still you writing code? And also, why is it that you're writing code? Is it the obvious, like you want to keep your skills sharp? That would be my guess as to why you'd be doing that. But I guess my question is, how much code are you still manually writing, and what's the kind of reason behind that?
So I write all the code, but sometimes I write it with an LLM assistant.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
At one point, I had written a whole set of scripts that I needed, and then I had the LLM look at it and back out what the requirements are and regenerate it for me just to see what it would do. So I write code still because it needs to be written and we need to look at it, but I also will use the LLM quite often to do some of the typing for me. I never have started off with just a requirement and said, hey, go generate an app for me. I don't have that kind of faith.
I feel like we're, and Paul, I know you like finding seams in code and things like that. I think we're finding a seam in the vocabulary here between typing and writing, in the sense that I'm going to guess, Tim, that you haven't typed most of your code, but you have written most of your code. Is that what's being hinted at here?
No, I'm still typing quite a bit of it, but quite often I'll, if I have legacy code that's written without a test and I need a test for it, it's quite easy for me to say, here, look at the requirements for this piece of code, write those tests for me. Because I hate being in a legacy code situation. It's, nobody wants to be afraid to touch the code. So that's a classic where I'll just have it generate them and I'll read the tests and then I'll have it fix the tests because I usually does them. They work. I wouldn't leave them in that shape. They tend to work in bad ways. Sometimes they even write conditionals into my tests, and a test should never have a conditional in it. It's what a thing to do. And then of course it always tests, it tests that the code is the way it's written if you don't have it back out to requirements and rewrite the tests. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of little things you have to do with it. But I do sometimes go for an hour or two, and all of the code that's written was written by an LLM, and sometimes I'll write examples and let it do the rest. So I can't really say for sure, but I do every day that I'm coding, I write some of the code by hand and some of it with an LLM, but I write it all.
Yeah, and there is this question of authorship, and Paul, before you alluded to this growing part of the population, let's say it like that gives the LLM build me an app prompt, and the LLM does everything. And if I compare it with you, who has had an LLM type all of your code since you said November, I think, you're still the author of that code, or you still consider yourself the author of that code, right?
I do when it does really clever things. I'm like, I'm glad I thought of that. No. I mean, yeah, it's a funny one. I would say that I'm still comfortable with my name against the code, like as it's committed, right? So my name goes against the commit. And again, the flow that we use, we do have pull requests, but I think I mentioned this to you before, but we do have pull requests, but they're very short-lived, and usually like we still do pair. Not always, maybe a little bit less than we were doing, but we still pair. We were doing a bit of mobbing today actually with an LLM. But yeah, I think I'm still at the point where, again, because I think we're working in similar ways, although I'm not physically typing the code, but I'm still working in quite small batches, and it's small enough that I can read through the code quite quickly. I can check it with all the guardrails that you've already mentioned, Tim, because I do the same thing with all the pre-commit hooks and all of that stuff. And actually, I've got some quite nice. This is another thing. Actually, Claude has helped me get some quite sophisticated linting rules now. So, as an example of that, when I mentioned I'm doing like the horizontal architecture stuff, I now have linting rules that prevent imports from, basically, like the domain cannot import from outside, if that makes sense. And so that's really nice. It will just automatically fail. And I've also got, because another thing I found it doing, again, because what I'm trying to do with the domain-driven design side of it, and I'm still learning domain-driven design. I'm not an expert at all. And my understanding as well, I'm not going to go massively into this, but there's at the higher level, there's two big parts to DDD, right? So there's the strategic stuff, which I haven't really got a huge amount of experience with. And you can't when you're doing your own project. I'm focused more on, I guess, the tactical side of it, right? Is my understanding. But one thing that I've made it do is I have a DDD glossary that it keeps up to date, and I force it to use those types everywhere, right? So, but what I found was when I have a type in the DDD glossary, it has this annoying tendency to redeclare them all over the place, right? So even though I've got it defined in my domain, I'll start reading for a test, and suddenly it's it's defined the same type again. So I had a conversation with Claude, and I was like, okay, how can we stop this happening like properly with a linter, right? And it did something that I thought was really clever. And one of the things it's done is it's got this, basically one of the linting rules I have now, you can give it a collection of shapes. So you basically give it a shape for say a money value object, right? Again, go back to that example. And that shape now is protected by linting, and it can only be declared in the entire application, or the entire repository actually, in this one directory, which is my domain, right? So if you try to create that shape anywhere, it will result in a linting failure, which is really, I thought is really cool actually. It's really quite powerful.
Yeah, so I think that it's our code because it was written to our satisfaction, and because we had our hands on guiding the creation of the code so that it fits. And where it has wandered off of the way we would write that code, we have corrected. And we've either corrected that with prompts and skills, with adding new context to it, with making changes, with adding new tools around it. One way or another, we take ownership of that code. So if you see something I've written by hand and you see something that I have spent the time writing with an AI assistant, it should be the same. And again, it shouldn't matter if it was typed by me, Claude, or an intelligent goose. It should be the same and subject to all the same scrutiny and all of the same automated checks and all of the same standards. It shouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm gonna take a lateral leap here because Paul, you mentioned two things that really interest me. One is that you did software teaming with an LLM, and I'm gonna put a pin on that because I really want to talk about that because I'm really curious. But you also mentioned that you do pairing, and it reminded me of something I read from you, Tim, today. I don't know if you posted it today. I read it today about the Centaur concept, which it reminded me of what it was. And for the audience, it's basically, it comes from chess, and it was when computers became better than people at chess because of sheer computation. A new category of chess was invented that was Centaur chess. And the idea is that the machine can give a lot of lines to the player, but it is the player who decides which line to follow. And the theory behind it is that a Centaur chess player can beat a machine and a human because upsides of both people that have the intuition and machine that have the sheer computation work together, right? Is AI there already in that it can really augment us to that point in which it is kind of foolish not to use it?
Well, that's a bigger question than I was thinking about today. So the first answer, of course, is I don't really know. I do think that the way it has augmented my knowledge is valuable, and it allows me to make decisions differently if I choose to. But also, I'm aware that this is a Dunning-Kruger honey trap, right? So whenever I'm working in something I don't know very well and it says, oh, well, you should do this way, and I look, oh, that's very clever, I have to remember that's how 1,000 people have done that in its training data set. And maybe they did it because it's a really smart thing, or maybe they did it because it's a stupid trap everybody falls in. So I always have to think, well, I have to be the intelligence. I have to be the creative anima, right? And it is the automaton that has access to more information than I do. And I have to balance that out. But it is sort of a Centaur situation, isn't it? There are things that I probably wouldn't have done or that I could have done. And then there's other things that I probably wouldn't have thought. When I first started working with Angular and with React, I didn't want to be stupid about it. I'd set up Storybook and I had it create components in Storybook, and I tested them and reviewed them and made them work. And then I read the code and I saw, oh, I don't like how you're doing this. Let's change that, as I learned what it was doing. So do I code at the level of the best human beings who write Angular code? Probably not yet. Do I write better than had I just had it generate the code? Yes, I do. Was it better than if I just wrote the code? Yes, it is. So I would say that we are in a Centaur situation that is expanding.
Yeah. I think at this point in time, you very much need you need your own level of expertise, right? Like, I think the scary thing, and I've expressed this on a few calls before, to me is more for juniors and people new to the industry who don't have the experience to fall back on. Because like people like us, obviously, you get a sense of taste for stuff over time, right? Like I've gotten to the point now where, and again, this is like pre-AI, I look at code for the first time, and the first thing I notice is not the code, it's the shape. Like I just see a shape of the code, and then I'm like, because I notice indentation, right? And if I see indentation, I'm like, oh God, okay. So straight away, I get a bit like annoyed by indentation, right? And I see the shape instantly, and like this happens over time, over many years of working on stuff and pushing yourself and practice and stuff, and it's for people like ourselves who've got that level of experience. You go into maybe a new domain, and you kind of know what questions you need to ask. You have a kind of maybe healthy skepticism there that again is informed by no doubt experience in the past where you've been burned and stuff like that. But I remember when I first joined the industry, because I'm self-taught, like my background is I had a degree in history, nothing to do with computers and stuff, and as you do. And, when I first started out, I remember my very first job, I would take code that I'd found online on forums, and it was even before Stack Overflow was even a thing, I think. And, I'd find code on forums and stuff. And if the code in the forum didn't work, I'd be convinced that it was me who was wrong because somebody else has written it and it must be better. It must be good. Do you know what I mean? And I worry about how people are going to gain the experience that they need to develop that taste when you're in an environment where you're almost expected, and the peer pressure is great to be productive instantly because of what the machine can do.
It is a funny situation. I want to get a t-shirt made of my little saying. I always say there's absolutely no substitute for knowing what you're doing. And that doesn't matter if you're a woodworker or a drone pilot or a programmer or, a doctor. There's no excuse. There's no substitute. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how well you're doing it. So it is one of those things. Somebody just recently said, "Oh yeah, this thing writes better code than I can. I told it to build this app and it did a better job than I could have." Well, what was better about it? Well, I wouldn't have made it look that good. So it has better CSS skills than you do. Does it have top-notch CSS skills? I don't know. I can't tell. Then why do you say that it did a great job? Not that it worked. Why? What makes you think it was great? Well, it did it so quickly. Well, it does everything quickly. That's the kind of the point. So again, it's a Dunning-Kruger honey trap. They've shown that, people, if you don't know Dunning-Kruger, if any of the listeners, they found out that the ability to judge quality work requires the same competence that it takes to do quality work. So if you don't know anything about medicine, any fact sounds like a great fact. Everything sounds really smart if you don't know why it's not smart, right? So the dumber you are, the more you think you understand things. And there's a funny curve that comes with that a novice with, 1 semester of psychology, well, they're ready to psychoanalyze the world. They understand it. And then somewhere in year 2 or 3, they suddenly realize they don't know anything about psychology. And that continues for the rest of their lives. Even, into age, it's like, I know how much I don't know. And my buddy Perry talks about Einstein had the circumference of the circle. Do you know this one? Okay. So if you think about, draw a circle, the area of that circle is how much you know. And then you see there's a circumference on that circle. And so you reach out and you learn a little bit more. Well, the circumference grows as the area grows. The more you know, the more area there is that you don't know. It's a greater space. And that was describing sort of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Well, here's an LLM. Hey, listen, here's a coding assistant. You can pop in with Copilot and you write a spec and you think it looks pretty good and you run it and it actually ran. By golly, let's ship it. Let's get out into production. And you find out that there's a million things that weren't covered. There's a whole bunch of things that no professional would have skipped. But you weren't a professional. It looked great to you because what did you know? How could you judge the quality of something when you don't have the skills to produce the thing, right? If you want to know if your house is quality construction, you got to get a builder to come in and look at it. Your drywaller knows if it's a good drywaller job. You don't know.
While all that is definitely true, like it's absolutely like you've not said anything there that I would disagree with at all. But the fear that I have though is that for people coming into the industry for the first time now, and my understanding right now, it's quite difficult to get in anyway. But if you're starting out, today's your first day on the job, and you join an organization, and there's senior developers there who are quite experienced, and they're all using LLMs. And you're looking at like a Jira board or whatever, and you're picking up a ticket. And every time you pick up a ticket, the seniors have done 5 tickets. It's an interesting one because it's almost like as an industry, this is going to be an industry-wide problem, right? And as an entire industry, we need to kind of have a way of dealing with this. Like, how do we give the new people joining the time to breathe and to learn and to make those mistakes? Because there'll come a point in time when you can almost see it happening, where there'll come a point where there's fewer and fewer people who've actually ever written like handwritten code and who do have those skills. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know how you reconcile that and maybe you work for a very understanding company who give you the time, but capitalism.
Being closer to that point in my road to knowledge, since I've been coding for about a little bit less than 10 years, I think we will still learn like we always learned, by fucking up and getting people that know better close to us. In the sense that most of what I learned, like I learned the importance of testing because I changed something and it broke something completely different in the app. And it was like, oh, how did that happen? How can I prevent that? I learned the importance of having modular code when I tried to change something and I couldn't. Oh, let's learn more about that. And then I worked with someone that knew more than I, and I could ask him questions, and he could actually answer the questions I didn't know I had. And like, yes, LLMs do have this effect of I can do a lot of mistakes before I realize I'm making mistakes, but mistakes will catch up with me. And so I think the main hurdle that exists right now, and I do have that fear of having quote unquote a lost generation, in the sense that for some reason the tech industry has decided that new programmers are not welcome anymore, but that's another question. But I think that will end because new programmers are still gonna have to be there. Someone has to take ownership of the code, and they will make mistakes, and they will learn because they will get close to someone that knows a bit more than them, and they will teach them that. And then they will realize, oh, I let the LLM build the whole app and it did a really pretty job. None of the buttons work. And this is in production now, and my boss is yelling at me. And so, like, you mentioned, Paul, the fact that you were copy pasting code from forums. I did it from Stack Overflow. Yeah, the first time you do it and it works, it's great. The second time you do it and you break production, is less great, and you learn that you actually have to understand it, right? So I think that we will learn as we always do.
Well, I think also it's kind of our job as the graybeards in the industry. It's our job to set up the system, right? We need to have the guardrails and the safeties. I learned C reading the classic Kernigan and Ritchie book. It was a long time ago. So, put on your time travel hats. You got to go back way pre-Windows type things, go run to the distance here. We typed in code out of magazines, and then we traded 5-inch floppies and then 3.5-inch floppies. And then, so we went through all that. But as much as I learned from the book, that was just a good start. I really started learning from the error messages that I got from the compiler and the warnings I got from the compiler. And then I got lint, and it's like, ooh, lint. This will spot all the things before I release my code so people can't, come and slam me for screwing up. And I had lint. So every language I had, I was using the strict modes on the compile. And I was, even when I came to Python, it's like, what are the other checkers I can put on Python? This is in the 90s, so what we have now is we have to have this thing set up, right? If you write code that's iffy, SonarQube is happy to explain why that's a problem. It gives you a link. You go to the link. It explains the problem. It shows you a bad example and a good example and why it's bad. So you spend a minute here and a minute there. Veracode does the same thing. Here's a problem. Click the link. Oh, that's why that's a problem. I get that now. And they'll give you quick fixes, right? So if we're doing a good job, they're going to sit down, they're going to pull fresh, clean code that actually works, that has tests. They're going to have the hooks. And when something fails, when something is flagged, it'll give them an explanation of why that's a bad thing. If we do our job right, it will help them come on board faster. And besides, I wouldn't worry too much. Nobody does fewer tickets than senior programmers. The more senior you are, the less time you get to spend closing tickets. You're going to find yourself helping everybody else do tickets and doing policies and doing reports. And then you're probably going to have to do some personnel things for your team. And you're going to end up being in meetings. Seniors do the least amount of actual measurable programming work anyway. So don't worry about that. You don't have to keep up with that. Yeah. It's the mid-range, that are actually in a pattern. They'll scoot along quite fast until somebody does them the disservice of making them senior. What does scare me, by the way, is when I find the senior programmer has 4 years of experience or less. That scares the heck out of me. Much more than coming into an AI world and not being able to learn how to code.
Aren't all programmers that have more than 4 years of experience seniors in this industry? I was called a senior when I had 3 years of experience, which shocked me. Because where do I go from there, right? And I self-aware enough to know that I was not a senior at that time, and I knew it then. But we have a tendency to call everyone senior quite fast in the industry, which muddies things a lot. I do have one question for you, Tim, and for you, Paul, as well, to be fair. But from what you're saying, Tim, as a senior, you have the least time to code. I am in a position of semi-management at the company I work at, and so my work is constantly interrupted, right? And I think it was Kent Beck that wrote the work to be interruptible. I'm hesitating if it's you or yeah, I was hesitating if it was you, Tim, or
myself and Perry Reed wrote that together.
It truly inspired me when I read it because I am interrupted more than I used to be, right? And I find that the LLM helps me be interruptible because it holds a memory. Like it tells me where I was, or I can read the history of what I was thinking at the time, right? Which I kind of had with TDD, but now it's much more contextual. And that's something that I really appreciate of.
Oh man, I do this all the time. What was I doing? Where are we? Did we finish that last task? I love it. Externalizing your context, best thing you can do. Sorry, Paul.
No, it's a funny thing because I don't think I'm familiar with the article, but the concept, if I understand, because it's something that if I understand what you're saying, and maybe I'm wrong, right? But are you essentially saying it's a good thing to be able to be interrupted and easily go back to your work, right? Is that essentially in a nutshell?
Yeah. So we can't. So how nice it would be to sit and build a whole thing in our head and then pour that gently through the funnel of our hands into the code. But none of us who has a job, we've been employed so that people have access to us, right? Yeah. There's none of us have the right to think that I should be able to go to work in the morning and talk to nobody and only do my work in my head and then have 14 hours of uninterrupted time. So when you know that, then working in the way that you must have long uninterrupted time seems to be a foolish choice. You can work that way, but you don't have a guarantee you're going to be allowed, and it evaporates if you get stopped. So you externalize your context. That way, when something happens, you can tend to it, whether it's the dog made a mess on the carpet or your kids need tucked in or somebody called and they need that TPS report by noon, whatever it is, you can step away and come back, regain your context because it's not inside your head. You don't have to remember it all and continue on with your work.
The interesting thing for me is I've been on a bit of a journey in my own career on this one because earlier in my career, I very much was the guy who I wanted to just sit with my headphones on and I'd have this entire world in my head of where all the code and the modules and all of this, right? And over time, luckily for me, I think I work with some really talented people in my career and I was always interested in how do I get better? So I'm always reading, even now I'm reading stuff, right? But not just that, if I'm working with really good people, I want to understand what makes them so good, right? And it wasn't just early on, it was oh, they're so good at the technical stuff, and I was obsessed with it, just the technical side of it. But I started to see that the really good developers and the ones that were really highly regarded by the business as well were they didn't just work like that. They were very social in the sense that they would speak to people very often and they would have these conversations where sometimes they'd find out that the feature that they'd been asked to build didn't really need to be built that way, or because they were asking all these questions and sometimes through the questions new things would arise and so on. And now I actually kind of pride myself on being kind of interruptible, if you like, because, first of all, again, the TDD stuff always helped. One of the reasons I got more into the functional programming, and this is more of a personal thing, but it was something that, at least for me, I found that it was able to kind of reduce my cognitive load quite heavily. I like the fact that, when you're not mutating stuff and when you've got pure functions and so on, if I'm trying to fix a bug somewhere, I can look through the code and I can I know that error must have happened in this block of code somewhere. Do you know what I mean? I know it has to, because I know the rules around it, right? Whereas when in my earlier days, when again, I was learning the ropes, and I know this isn't just an OOP, and I know that like you can write good object-oriented code. I don't, but I would have these big object-oriented designs with inheritance all over the place, and oh, you want to change this thing over here? Well, oh God, and then I need this map in my head of like 400 things, and do you know what I mean? And it's like almost like in a way, kind of getting older and grumpier in a way, and less patience for having to think too much. Like it annoys me if I have to think too much. Do you know what I mean? And so like by being annoyed at that, I'm like, how can I reduce my thinking time? How do I not need to think so much? And like you said already, like Pablo, nowadays, if you're talking to an LLM, you've got some context there. I have this habit of coming back after a weekend, finish on a Friday, come back on the Monday. It's a call, just remind me, what were we doing again? And it just, the session's still open. But yeah, it's nice to, again, a lot of it comes down to the, smaller context. And like you said, externalizing your context, you can do that maybe with tests and so on. And reducing that cognitive load over time. And a lot of these principles, like all the solid stuff and all of this stuff, it's so much of it to me is about kind of like once you understand like the underlying rules and how to kind of get there and so on, it is about just making your life easier to me. Just one really quick one. Sorry, I'm talking for a while, but the hexagonal stuff, just as an example, I first started getting into that because I thought, it's really cool how, you could switch, email providers, newsletter providers, you could switch to a different database and, this kind of stuff because you're working against, ports, right? But the thing that I actually found was the biggest benefit of anything was having this purely testable internal logic that is completely isolated. Like the business logic is isolated completely from the outside world. And so you can test it completely in isolation. It's really powerful.
I think that's a big part of it, right? When you do work that way, and by the way, I did too for a long time, and you get these big ideas in your head, and maybe you've talked them out with somebody, maybe you've done it all by yourself. But when you've done that and you get away with it, it feels so incredible to have gone into like mad scientist mode and built these worlds and then realized these worlds. And then by golly, it worked, and it worked pretty much like you thought it would. And that feeling is amazing. And the fact that you can do that is such a cool feeling, but it doesn't work in your favor. It's one of the problems is, the same thing like people, well, I don't like to write TDD. It distracts me to think about tests when I have this idea I'm trying to get into the code base. And it's like, well, I understand that because you like to have this big idea and go chase all these big things and edit 500 places without committing yet because you don't know if it's all going to work yet. And the thrill of it working at the end is so exciting and you lose track of time. Oh, that feels really good. But it's not in your best interest. It is not your friend. It feels, I'm sure it feels really good to use drugs, I guess, but is that in your best interest? Does it do you the most good? Well, probably not, right? I don't know. I'm not very experienced in the realm. I like whiskey, but I only like a little bit because it doesn't do me any favors if I have more of it, right? So you got to think about, are we doing things because we like the way they feel, or are they getting us better results? Which, by the way, has been always the reason why XP is hard to spread. You tell people you're going to be pair programming, you're going to be writing tests. They think two things I don't like to do is have to sit and talk with people and to write tests. Well, does it get a better result? It always has. It has always worked. It has always given a better result. It is working in your favor, but it doesn't sound like fun.
I'm gonna agree with everything you're saying, but I'm gonna take the tangent you're offering and extend it a bit in the sense that, well, I enjoy writing tests probably because of I've realized what it brings me, and like it once you get used to it, it becomes fun. As with anything, I also really like pair programming and software teaming, and those I have not done enough because they don't sound fun to everyone. I depend on the other people for that. Tests I can write on my own. But whereas those things make me feel like I'm thinking less, whilst also making me more interruptible, AI assistants, I feel like they're increasing my cognitive load. Like, I am more interruptible, but they increase my cognitive load by a lot. Like, I feel knackered at 1 p.m. If I've been paying attention the whole time, the quantity of information, because they like to write, and if you read everything they write, the quantity of information man I'm absorbing at 1 p.m. I can't work anymore. Like, my day is done. It doesn't matter if I have tokens or not. My day is just done. Do you have something similar?
Yeah, oh, you have to hold them back, which I think, it's a straightforward, obvious idea, right? If you have 5 programmers and they each wrote 250,000 lines of code last week, do you really feel like releasing that? Absolutely, right? That's 1.25 million lines of brand new code that have never seen the light of day, and I'm going to put them out there on Friday. Not a chance. Not a chance. Right? I have no idea what's in there, how many blobs of rancid chicken liver have been deposited. I don't know what I'm dealing with. I wouldn't release that. So you'd have to hold them back to a reasonable level. You have a system that isn't just coding. There's a whole bunch of other things involved in bringing the product to production, and you have to think about optimizing the whole of that. And the best way to get things to go through is to raise your first time through rate. So every time you submit something and it doesn't make it through the pipeline all the way, it comes back for remediation. It slows down the next job in line because you have to swap. You fix it, you resubmit it. It uses that time again to get to a point to see if it's going to pass this time. And if it comes back, I've been at places where people were juggling 5, 6, 7, 8, as many as 12 things. So they kept resubmitting. They keep coming back later, and they're trying to figure out which remediation to do next to get it back into the pipeline. That's not a productive way of working, right? If you really want to be productive, you get your first time through rate up. So I want to submit today into my pipeline and know it's going to go all the way to production without a problem. But I can only do that if I've controlled my scope while I'm doing my work. Because if I can't control the scope, I can't make sure with all of the checks I have handy that it's actually going to make it through. And if I fire it out and it bounces back, then that's the beginning of unpredictability. That's why nobody knows when software is going to finish, because we don't know how many times it's going to bounce. So yeah, control the scope. It can, if you just leave it wide open. By the way, when I'm doing it not for code, it eats my lunch. I gathered a bunch of architecture documents in the system that I'm still new to, and I had to provide a bunch of information. I'm asking questions, and I have to start looking up the words it's telling me. I don't even know the words. I don't even know the language it's in. And I'm loading up new intelligence, new terminology, new knowledge. I'm just squeezing it in with a funnel and a plunger. And it's like, I need to go take a walk. I got to let this incubate. That's just too much. But with code, I think I'm better at controlling the scope.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that, to be honest. Like, it's like, what is the average kind of change set size for you? I guess, like, if you're doing a piece of work, if you're building a feature, like how are you scoping that feature?
So it depends on how intentional I am. I'm gonna tell you both versions: the version I want to be and the version I sometimes am. Right? Because as with anything, there is what we tell ourselves we do. We do 15 commits an hour, and what we actually do, we do 6 commits an hour, right? If I'm intentional, my changes are probably or at least not the commits, but I'm seeing code or output from the LLM every 3 to 6 minutes, something along those lines. I'm validating the files one by one, etc. On a day where my decision power or my decision willpower has been worn down for reasons external to code, because when you were not coding all the time, some things can worn down your decisions, and I just let it go, I might not give input for 20, 25 minutes. And those are the worst days, because at some point I actually went crazy and I had 5 work trees working at the same time. It took me 2 months to get out of that hell. Like in a week, I created 2 months of how can I actually merge these now? But I tend to only have one thing in progress. When I'm well behaved, it's about 6 minutes between interactions. 3 to 6 when...
I'm going to make a suggestion. There's my other blog, not the Industrial Logic blog, but the Agile Otter blog. I'll post a link here. We can get it into the show notes if you want. There is I do a series of listicles now and again. So a listicle is a list article. I've got 4 or 5 of them there. Look them up. They're all okay. And people help me gather the material for them. So if I post a listicle, then I'll get 4 or 5 emails and LinkedIn messages. Hey, what about this one? And I'll add them in. So they're not, I can't say they're comprehensive entirely, but they're comprehensive enough. But take this, feed this to your favorite LLM, have it use this article and its immediate citations, all of its immediate references, and build you a skill called story splitting. This has been a game changer. So I already knew how to split things. I was actually pretty good at it, but I gathered everybody else's stuff by using this and put it into a pile. And now I can give it a user story, which is one thing, it's a feature, may have multiple stories, but however you want to slice it. So you get a story and you say, I want to implement this end to end in executable, usable, working slices. Help me out with this. Use a story splitting skill on this story. And it's going to start coming through and show you, well, I would do this first, then that, then the other. You can take that, or you can say, no, not like that. How about we focus on this first? Let's go risk first. Let's go feasibility first. Let's go whatever. And it'll start giving you different slices. You could do this yourself if you read the stuff, but it's kind of handy as a skill. It's quick. I would also like to give this to junior programmers. I think it would be helpful. I haven't posted the skill I built out of it yet. It does a pretty good job. Every LLM I've tried this with has built a pretty decent prompter skill based on story splitting, and given a story on a code base, it can start to give you a pretty good idea of how to do this. Instead of doing it in 2 steps or 1 step, how could you do it in 15? And the smaller your steps are, the better your scope control is, the smaller your commits are, the more certain your tests are, and the more interruptible you are. It's a pretty good deal. Or just read it all and do it yourself. That works probably even better.
Codex is building a skill as we speak. I've got it doing it in the background now. I'm interested to see what it creates. So it's saying, we'll see what I've got it in extra high mode, which I have noticed is a bit slower in Codex, but it's doing its thing now. So it's reading it, and I've told it to read all the linked articles and so on. So we'll see. But what we could potentially do, if you like, because I'll add it to my doc files, so I could put the link after, and you can see the skill that got created if you want.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'm gonna guess that it's probably in the list already, but what you're saying, Tim, reminds me of I think it was Jipo Hill, many steps. I don't know how many M's are there. I don't
many more, much smaller steps. MMMSS. Best thing to read.
I do a version of that, but I not handcrafted it, but it's not really polished. But that's a good point of looking for external stuff to build that skill, right? Because I tend to say I want you to do smaller steps or whatever. Let's write a skill for that, but it takes whatever generic knowledge it has, and then I augment it as I can. But
well, it's really nice to have, GPaw does a good job of expressing this and then giving lots of examples and giving lots of additional thinking tools to make it all work. He is one of the best code philosophers going. I think he and Mike Feathers are still 2 of my favorites and the guys that I've worked with. So it makes me very proud to have been able to be in good company so often.
Oh wow! You work with Michael Feathers. That's cool, because his book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code, it's an absolute classic. That book, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, we worked together while he was writing that.
Wow!
And I remember shortly after it was published, the phone calls used to come in and can we have Uncle Bob come out and talk? Can we have Uncle Bob? And then when his book came out, the calls kept coming in going, can we have Michael? Oh, Bob's available. Yeah, but can we have Michael? But he's a proper code philosopher. See what he's been writing these days. He didn't stop with that book. He has gone well beyond, and he's worth reading. And everything that GPaw wrote about software will change your life. But yeah, so I love the thing that he got to was about going from ready to ready. So, I run my little prepare script. It updates my environment. I'm clean with version control. I have a current version of code from the upstream branch, right? So I'm ready to go. I am ready. I can make a change. Now, if I take an algorithm that takes 17 steps and I implement the first step, I'm not ready. I can't push that and move on. I'm stuck in that path until I finish all the steps. Whereas if you're thinking in many more, much smaller steps, it's like, well, what's the thin stripe I can do now? And that's Josh always writes about walking skeletons. And he didn't invent that, but he definitely popularized walking skeletons. Bill Wake wrote a lot about walking skeletons and all the various different phrasings of the same idea. And of course, it goes to pragmatic programmer with tracer bullets, and it's been everywhere. Everybody's done this. But man, that way of working with an LLM is pretty sweet. So you get it sliced down thin. Each slice is actually releasable. It won't hurt. So the favorite question is, what would happen if we were to release what we have right now? The answer is always, nothing would happen. It would be fine. It's a pretty sweet way of working. And that's what Ron said. Ron says the secret is never let the code not be working.
The secret is do it well.
But Pablo, do you are you in the habit of releasing code that is you're still building it? You're still so one of the things we do, we have feature toggles as well, right? So we make kind of heavy use of feature toggles, and so I like to work in a way where you make a distinction between what is released but what is customer facing as well, right? So you can release stuff that's not, you can release to production without it being customer facing, right? And yeah, I try to always think in these terms. I'm going to read all these like articles and stuff, and I'm the skill's still building it in the background now. But to me, it's always about trying to figure out the as you say, like the smallest kind of workable slice. But like when you get a piece of work that comes through, like a new feature, how are you kind of slicing that down at the moment? Like, how does that work for you right now?
It depends. In most of my career, most of my learning has been from books. And so I've read a lot of books because I got in, like the first book that really changed how I see programming was The Pragmatic Programmer. And it sent me down a path, right? And so as much as I can control it, my idea is let's do releases that work all the time. Let's, if needed, but even if it's not needed, even better, let's just put a feature flag there. The code is building, the code is in production. Ideally, I do some canary testing. And that's something that I've tried to evangelize wherever I've been with more or less success. And so now at my company currently, it's getting more traction and we are starting to work more systematically in that way. But again, if systemically that does not happen, sometimes you just can't fight the system. And I've been with PRs open for 3 months that are just like, okay, I started. And since we have PRs that need to pass, now I have 3 PRs built up and like you make comments on the first one and now it's one big PR. And that's it. Like, I'm not going to try to back propagate things. And that's, it happens less and less, but it can happen, right? So today I do release, like, we track the DORA metrics as a proxy for not how well we're doing, but more how things are moving on ourselves, right? And as a team, we are 4 or 5 developers in our team. We release between 10 and 15 times a week. So I feel like that's quite a respectable pace. It could be better, obviously, but for a company that does not do trunk-based development, I feel like it's best than par for the course, right?
Yeah, I would say that that's exceptional.
Thanks. I see it as best than par for someone that does not do trunk-based. But yeah, so we release quite frequently and not all of it is available to the public. Like right now we have at least 2 features behind feature flags being actively worked on. Well, I don't know what that tells you. I try not to talk much about me in these episodes, but there's a nugget.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because you're obviously expressing a problem at the moment with like cognitive load. And to me, like day to day, I don't feel that so much with AI, at least the way that I'm kind of working with it. Actually, where I do feel it, that's not entirely, well, that in the day job, I don't really feel it. But in my personal thing, I've actually made a few mistakes recently in this personal project I've been doing, and got a bit ahead of myself with like the UX and of the thing that I'm doing, and kind of got into a bit of a mess where I wasn't happy with how the UX was going on this app. So I got AI to create multiple variants of what it could look like prototypes. And I ended up with so many of these that I couldn't select. That was like overwhelming for me. So I got like just basic HTML prototypes, right? And so many variants of, if you do this thing slightly different, you do that thing slightly differently. And I found that quite hard to, kind of handle, if you like. And I don't know, I almost need to be a bit more disciplined myself there and go back and say, I need to simplify the UX that I'm working on, I think, but I don't know.
Well, sometimes it's the UX to work on, sometimes it's the DevX. What's it like to work on the code? And when that's the problem, then, that's usually more of the bottleneck anyway. When it's hard to work on the code for any reason, even cognitive overload, this should be joyous.
It has created a skill here, but I'm not going to read through it now. But I'll later I'll send you the link, and if you want, you can take a look at what it created.
Yeah, I'll post all of the links we like, all the links and books you've shared. I'll try to post on the show notes. And audience, if I forgot anything, let me know. Let's take a page out of Tim's book, and if I forgot anything in my list, let me know and I'll add it. This discussion is kind of teeing me up for a question I wanted to ask you both. Is old becoming new again? Like, are LLM assistants or AI code assistants or whatever the thing that can make XP principles, that can make all of that more palatable to a wider audience? Because part of the things that were scary for people were the chores, quote unquote, of them, right? Like testing first, like slicing thin, etc., etc. Can that be the missing link?
So we're seeing it. People are getting excited now about doing test-driven because it makes the agentic stuff work. And people are now, I pair with my agent, which that's not really fair. I would put scare quotes on pairing in that case. But, Centaur is, it's maybe that's the gateway to pair programming and mob programming when they see how they can do that. It does get people to externalize their context so that they can stop and resume, which is a powerful step, like we just mentioned. People are putting more focus on doing code reviews with automated tools. So they're adding, the linters and the security checkers and duplication checkers and dead code detectors and all of these things, because now it's starting to become more important to them. Things that we did in the 90s and the early 2000s because that's just the right way to develop. And they were like, no, I'm not going to do that. Now those are the things they're doing as a survival skill. And it's making them, experience what that's like, see what tests are bad and which ones are good. It's not perfect. I certainly know of teams out there that they've hooked up like Sonar Cube or something like that in their pipeline, and it produced a whole bunch of errors. So they're just not looking at them anymore, and they keep it in an advisory role and they don't read it. So it's just wasting CPU cycles and storage is all it's really doing. And someday they'll get around to configuring it. But we have made it easier to do those things. So one of the things I did do is I took a code base, and I knew the code base was old and I knew it had problems. And I set up my linter on it. And I said, okay, took a look at the linter. I saw all the things that failed. And I said, okay, we need to back down the settings until it passes. So don't hit the security pieces yet, but take a look at like code smells and things, and let's keep backing it down. And it's like, well, okay, I just reduced this one and I only got 500 failures. I just reduced this. Now we have only 300 failures. Did this. Now there's only 280. Now there's, boom, finally we found a level where it worked. And of course I'm reading, which I had it classify, the specific errors. And we looked at it and thought, well, let's back that one down. Let's back that one down. I didn't even know how to configure the tool, but the LLM did. It's not a skill I necessarily need, but we backed it down to match the code as it is so that it won't get any worse, right? And then we put an advisory scan that takes the next level we're planning. So your code is fine, but in a week or two, these things are going to need to be cleared up.
I've heard that referred to as the, have you heard the term rising watermark?
Yes.
That's what so somebody said that to me once and it always stuck with me. And because he was working in a code base with low coverage, and he did the same thing, lowered it to like where the lowest point where you could actually get it to pass. And then they keep bumping it up and up and up. And it's rising watermark.
Now, my one complaint with Sonar Source people, I got to have some nice conversations with them because I got to talk with their developer experience people. And Campbell, by the way, is awesome. But the thing I asked for was, I said, it would be great if we could do a first run of a full scan, and then you give me a button, and I click the button, and that's now the standard. And then it can't be worse than that. And then later, as it gets better, I can push the button again and to a higher standard. I said, that would be the best thing we could do for our teams, but they didn't agree with me, and they never have implemented that button to the best of my knowledge. But I think that set your watermark and then control it from there would be a great thing. So write to Sonar Source as soon as you get a chance, send them an email, mention it on social media. See if you can't to say, Tim had this idea of putting the rising watermark.
We want the button.
Yeah, it's a great idea, that, honestly.
It wouldn't be, I'm not saying that it's easy. It's like, well, just put a button on my screen, and when you push it, it cures cancer. It's not like that. But I mean, it's a measurable thing. There is data. And if you have the data, you can compare the new run against the old run, right? It's a golden standard test.
A version of that, like I use standard RB as a linter, basically because it pre-chose principles. Like for me, as long as most of it is sound, I don't want a lot of people making choices. So if a choice can be made for us, let's run with that. Again, looking at the choices first. And what they do that I really like is like the files that have offenses that are not auto-fixable, they will put them in a to-do with the exact offense and the exact line. And it's like, okay, those are bad, but we're not going to allow you any other bad line, right? And I don't know if I'll ever fix them, but like code churns naturally. So at some point, most of the important parts will be fixed, right?
So Perry and I, again, we decided one day that as an experiment, we would only allow 3 to-dos in a code base. That was interesting, because if we want to put a new one in, we have to take an old one out.
I like that idea. I don't. Do you add to-dos then? Because like I don't really add them, to be honest, because I just found that they just get ignored. But having three maximum, I like the idea that, basically, like you say, you've got to fulfill one or take one out.
There's a cool trick that grew out of it, though, is when I'm going to end of life a component and replace it with another one, I rename the old component to be doomed whatever. And then I write the new one with new whatever. And then in the code, you can see that it's calling the old one. And then the one to do is switch this to new whatever. And then when people see the PRs or they look at the code diffs, it's like, oh, that's the doomed thing. I'm not going to call the doomed thing. That's going away. I need to call the new thing.
That's nice. Answering your question, Paul, about if we had to-dos, I don't tell my coworkers this, but I actually remove every to-do I see from the code base, and no one has noticed yet.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah. Can I just mention one thing, because you just winding back a little bit when you said about old things coming new again, just as a reflection on the whole XP thing, because I actually find it like you're absolutely right to reference it in that way, but like I find it depressing, to be honest, that it's seen as an old thing, because to me it's so like I've actually got the book here, right? So I was just like in the preface of this book. Let me just find because I posted this on LinkedIn a while back, right? I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but just a few bullet points, right? So here it says, right, so this is in the preface, right? It's Eric Gamma wrote this in September. Well, I'll tell you the year in a minute, but I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's a bullet point list, right? And I'll just read the main bullet points, right? Here is how we apply some of these practices. So testing early, often and automated, incremental design, daily deployment, customer involvement, continuous integration, short development cycles, and incremental planning. Now, I look at that and I'm like, that shouldn't be seen as like an old thing. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not the thing for me in the industry. I started off not knowing any of this stuff, right? Like, so I started around, I think around 2005-ish, around that time. Self-taught, right? Working in small places, everything going wrong, everything on fire all the time, no tests, no automated tests, didn't even know what they were at the time. My very first job, I didn't even know what version control was, and that was hilarious. We used to have a guy in London, we used to just save stuff via FTP, and he would occasionally just be working in the same file as us, and we didn't know, and he'd just overwrite, and that was always fun. But, over the years, becoming more and more interested in this stuff, like how do I get better? How do I get better? And there's a point where I started a job in like 2013, and I was introduced to a ton of stuff all in one go, right? So all the Scrum stuff, right, I was introduced to as well. So, but really strict, kind of taking it very literally, right? So story points being one of the very first planning meetings I was in that job. My God, like they called it Agile, right? It's the first time I'd properly experienced this whole Agile thing, right? We do Agile here, right? And one of the very first planning meetings, they had an argument that lasted about 10 minutes because they could only allow 31 story points. I remember the exact number of story points. They're only allowed 31 and they went to 32. So something had to go out, right? And it was taken so literally. But at the same time, all in one go, I was also introduced to pair programming and test-driven development and all of these things, right? And over time, as I started working there and, started growing confidence and getting a bit more experience, I developed this perspective on things that I thought worked really well and things that I thought just didn't work well and really annoyed me. And it turns out that pretty much everything that I thought worked really well was XP, right? So it was like the pairing, it was the close collaboration with the business and feedback and test-driven development and all of that stuff was brilliant, right? And I became convinced that's how you do Agile, because that stuff works and you work in small increments and, it's amazing. And not only that you work in small increments, you're always confident. Having that technical foundation and that confidence to make changes over time means that you have these business advantages because you can go to the business and you can speak to them and, oh, what do you want to try out? Oh, we try this and that didn't work. Oh, right. Well, we can move direction and blah, blah, blah. And all the stuff that I thought was just absolute nonsense was like the stuff that turns out was Scrum, right? So it was stuff like, I know story points are not a Scrum thing, right? I know they're not. I found that out after, but
that's our fault. That came from our XP. I'm so sorry.
But it's, but it, even to this day, like I find Scrum very, it feels very middle management-y to me. It feels very like it's, you do 2-week sprints and then you have this meeting and it all feels kind of constructed around, being able to make nice graphs that middle management can look at. And it's like, I don't care about a burn down. I just don't care. I don't care about that. But I do care that I care very deeply about the product that we're building, and I want the product to be a success, and I want customers to, to be building the best possible thing for customers. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know, working in these small ways and stuff. It's you're right when you phrase it that it kind of is an old thing in a way, but people who are listening to this and maybe don't have that experience, don't make the mistake of thinking that just because something came before you that it isn't a great thing. Do you know what I mean? Because it works really well.
Some of the most wise things ever said were said well before any of us were born.
Yeah.
To be fair, when I refer to it as old things being new again, it's more old battles being rekindled, in the sense that I feel like these principles apply and have applied in the past, and they didn't get. And I had a couple of, I had an episode about XP and an episode about misunderstood concepts in tech, and I always ask the question of why they didn't take, when a lot of really smart people really swear by them, right? And I think in part they require a discipline that takes a lot of skill, takes a lot of time. You can't just get in and get it at the first time, and you have to make your mistakes and you have to know someone. Etc. I feel like those principles have not gotten their place, in part that complexity, in part they work by giving a lot of power and control to the person actually doing the job, which runs counterculture with a lot of organizations. Scrum manager or Scrum, I don't know how they actually call it, but it's a title because someone has got to have the power, when in the actual thing it's not a title, it's a role which can be held by someone that does something else, whatever. And they didn't get that place because of that. And I wonder if now actually needing them, because the volume of code that gets produced shows you the bottlenecks so fast, is not going to get them the place they deserve. Is a big word, but you know what I mean.
I haven't seen where Scrum benefits LLM-based development yet, but I keep seeing places where XP. Remember, though, in the 2000s, the official marketing term, people said that Scrum was a management interface to Agile. And they said that they needed to have Scrum because people don't know how to work with XP teams. It's too foreign. Other Agile teams, various different, Crystal or whatever. So they needed to have a management framework around it. And then internally inside the industry, we said, well, Scrum is just the box XP comes in. And if you go back to those days, you'll find then the originators of Scrum were saying, well, the only way to get real productivity out of Scrum is you put XP underneath it. Your team should be doing XP, which is funny because you get great productivity with XP with no Scrum. You get great productivity with XP with Scrum. What's the common denominator in this picture? But so the Scrum things aren't making much of a difference in agentic development, but the XP things are. But the thing that bothers me, because in the late 80s, early 90s, well into the 90s, really up into the mid 90s, I was a waterfall guy, and we believed in it. And I read the books, and I followed all the structured design principles. I was up on that front edge. I was working. And we were doing government contracts and a lot of things that required a lot of documentation and a lot of upfront thinking. And we built specs and we built detailed design. You had spec, requirements and high level design and low level design and code and test. And you had all of the things that the waterfall wanted to have. And we kept trying to make it work. And every time it didn't work, the answer was we should have spent more time up front. We should have delayed coding longer. We should have delayed. We started coding too soon. We shouldn't have done it then. We should have gone another 3 months on writing papers. And of course, the programmers should have followed the designs we wrote. They all improvised. We weren't doing it hard enough. It's like, violence and drugs. If it's not working, you have to use more of it. That's pretty much the case I had with Waterfall. And we all learned, and the Standish report started coming out and measuring Agile projects and Waterfall projects. And they found out that if you do Agile in a waterfall, you're still 40% more likely to be successful by the standards of Waterfall, not even using the standards of Agile. So that was about, on time, under budget, full scope. If you did it by Waterfall, your chances were quite slim. If you did it by I don't know, I don't remember what, but I remember it's 40% difference, 40% better if you even did that with Agile practices instead of Waterfall practices. So I thought, wow, Waterfall isn't even the best waterfall. Agile is a better waterfall even. And people are, don't do waterfall and don't do waterfall with Agile under it. Well, it's better than doing it with waterfall under it. Everything's relative. So when we get to agentic development, is the waterfall thing helping? Well, hold on. It's back, right? Because it sounds so reasonable that if you didn't make this mistake, I would question your judgment. It sounds reasonable that if we built all the right designs, did all the right requirements, we did the right specification, that we would hand it off to be coded. And if they code to the specification, then we should have a perfect system, which is what I spent 10 years not able to really do for very, very good reasons in the 80s and 90s. It's not a workable system. It never worked there, but we still delivered. So sometimes we still delivered. And the reason we delivered is because we didn't really do the thing that we said we were doing. We lied. Here's your book for that one. Systems Bible by John Gall. And he'll tell you that systems don't actually do what they say they're doing. But as long as the system reports that it's doing the thing, then that becomes the truth. The reports the truth is not the truth. And that's how these things run. So you get into agentic development. We know that we can do this incrementally. We can do many more, much smaller steps. It's easy. We can get the tests in. We can put the guardrails in. We can work in phases. We can do continuous delivery. Eventually decide that some of the stuff we've delivered to production, we'll call it a release, make a big splash because we've decoupled releases from deployments. That's pretty cool, right? And then somebody goes, oh, we could waterfall this.
The line you said about systems lying made me think a couple of weeks ago, I spoke at a really small conference about how we removed the backlog and we started going faster, which with a lot of asterisks all over the place. But part of the asterisk is that I didn't actually remove the backlog. We just stopped looking at it. It's still there. We just don't really look at it anymore. And it's part of that lying to the system, right? Like, we're going to do our thing. And if the system needs a backlog, it's going to be there. Don't worry about it. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, but we are going to have to start ending it. I will ask one last question that I asked Paul the last time, and I really find it interesting. At which price are LLM assistants not useful anymore? Is there a number in which they don't become viable?
Who wants to answer first? I can't remember what I said last time. I vaguely remember what I said. I mean, because I'm doing stuff in my own time as well, and the learning of it. I would say that the price I'm paying now, so I pay for Claude at the 20 times model, which is about, I think it's about £150 a month, something like that. And I pay for Codex, GPT 5.5 at the 5 times model now because I'm kind of trialing it, which is about £80 a month. I feel like that's an absolute bargain right now. Like, it's clearly a steal because like these things they cost so much more to run than that. I don't know. It's like hard to say, isn't it? Like, I don't know. Putting a figure on it is quite difficult. I think I said at the time, like, I'd probably go up to like £1,000 a month for it personally. Right now, if I can afford to pay it, if you're in a position to pay it. I don't know what you'd say to it, Tim, whether you'd probably give a much smarter answer than me coming out with a figure like that. But I don't know.
So I use a number of them for free. I just use the free subscriptions and I have a few of them that I rotate between for that because I am perhaps not notorious for being cheap, but maybe not yet, but it's well deserved. And I'm, look where I'm living now. I'm living in amongst frugal people. I live in Scotland. I grew up among frugal people in the farmlands in Indiana. I have maintained a certain frugality. I'm not too extravagant. I don't use a number of free ones. I do pay for Warp. It's like a $20 a month. I pay it in US. So it's like $20 a month to begin with. And then I usually top up with another 20 or 30. That's for my home use. My employer pays a lot more for theirs. We have unlimited tokens and all of the things we're doing. So Copilot and ChatGPT and Codex and just a whole bunch of others. But seriously, the fact is I can write this code myself. I can do this all. I'll have to look up how to configure the tools again. I'll miss that. I could use it a lot less. And actually, one of the things I'm doing is writing a bunch of scripts so that I use less of the LLM to get a better result because I'm about efficiency. It should be cheap, efficient, quick, right? And do a good job. So I'm trying to, that's why I'm not using swarms. It's like, well, Tim, why are you not using swarms? I thought, it's 2026 because I'm frugal. I want to make sure I make the best use of it, not the most use of it. And so when it costs a team of 5 people as much as if they were 8 people, I'm thinking that that's starting to push the limit of maybe it's being overused. That's going too far. I think that it doesn't take that much when it starts offsetting salaries. It's nice when you want to hire 5 more people and you can't, but you can give 7 teams each, a big pile of tokens to spend. That's great because it's hard to hire people, even though people can't get jobs. It's a tough business. So I think I know it's a long answer, but I think you have to pay it, it's opportunity cost, right? If I can't hire staff that I need because I spend too much on this, if I can't expand my Amazon Web Service presence and commute, the compute bill or the data egress and ingress costs, because I'm paying for Claude, I'm strangling myself. I'm just tripping on my own shoes at that point. When it gets in the way of the things we need to do, it's too much. And then the answer is probably to back it down rather than throw it away until it's not in the way of your capital expenditures anymore. It's just too much. It can be too much. Me, I'm going to use the extra money to buy guitars.
I like that last sentence you said, or last sentiment you said about if it becomes too much, you should scale it down so it gets out of the way. And then you specify of your CapEx, but actually just out of your way, right? Because it can get in your way in a number of ways. And the answer is not remove it. It's not scale it up. It's scale it down until it's not in the way anymore.
Yeah, it's a matter of what you're willing to sacrifice at that altar.
I have to end it now. Thank you both so very much for the longest episode in this podcast today. And
yeah,
on the top of the most interesting ones, for sure. Thank you both really, really much.
Yeah, it was great. Enjoyed it. Thanks both.
Looking forward to the 3-episode series.
Yeah.